William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 218th meeting for your information. We started in February of 2009. Actually, it started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. And tonight we have two blues brothers from the Windy City of Chicago. They're going to be talking to us. I'll go on that a little bit later, but we put our speaker on for an hour, and if anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter that we only listen to one fool at a time. That's our rule. And if anybody, and after that we have questions and answers, not speeches. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium to respond to what the speaker said, for or against. And then our speaker gets to close. He gets to close the meeting. They get closing remarks. They get to comment and close the meeting. But before we introduce our speakers, now is the time for announcements. Any announcements? Oh, well, come on in. Come on up here and give your announcement.
Okay. All right. I'm Jan Maxon. Okay. All right. So I just came from, was anyone there at the Bathhouse Cultural Center this afternoon? Oh, and I watched just the sunset. I didn't want to leave. So they had some booths in the exhibit of that Corazon, the Heart exhibit they have every year in February. And I just love that place. Anyway, so I thought that would be good on my way over here. But anyway, they were celebrating International Women's Day, but there's another group celebrating, a bunch of groups together next Saturday afternoon, and it's a free event. They're going to have about 30 tables of organizations, and they're going to have people representing different organizations. And the main speaker is the Texas AFL-CIO President Becky Moeller and other speakers. So it's a day, it's called Texas Women Inspiring Change. So you'll see a variety, a cross-section of all the women's organizations that are activists, especially now, you know. And but it's very woman-oriented, but empowering, and for all of us to be there and to find out, again, what are the main issues, I think we're going to hear the best of the best of some of the local speakers if they only have a few minutes. Okay, so I have these, I'll hand these out. There are men coming too. So it's okay. But it's sponsored by 4 different groups, and the deadline to reserve a table was yesterday, but, you know, and I think they're full already on that. They already have RSVPs just online of 80 people coming. So I think to expect 150. They want your RSVP to have an idea of how many are coming. So it's free. I like free. And so I'll hand these out. And if you can't use it, give it to someone else that you run into this week. Okay? Thank you. It's next Saturday, and it's 1:30 to 4:30, but if you want to come a little earlier to help us set up or stay a little bit later, that's what I'm going to do. Just to experience the whole day. Okay. See y'all there.
Anyone else? Come on up here. Another announcement. It's all yours.
Hi there, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a volunteer at KNON 89.3 Dallas Community Radio. And tomorrow afternoon, early evening, we are going to be celebrating our Zydeco Fest over at Poor Dave's on South Lamar downtown. And we're determined at Poor David's Pub on South Lamar downtown tomorrow. The staff gets there at 4. So my guess is that it would be at 5, and I would look at knon.org. It's my hope that Rosie Leday is playing, because Rosie Leday is awesome. And our catering is either from 2 entities, the Alligator Cafe or Red Hot and Blue Barbecue. And at knon.org you can see what they're posting and who they are putting up for Blues Fest. But I do recommend that you come down in support of Dallas Community Radio because they are not executive supported. We are listener supported and volunteer supported. And we really hope to see you come out. You can get them at the door, and you can also buy tickets to eat from the catering, and I will be working at the door, so. But do come down and see us. We could really use your support at the station.
Any other announcements? Looks like somebody here waiting to give announcements. Go ahead.
Vote.
That was a good announcement. Any other announcements? All right, well, next week we have Cycles of Bondage and Freedom of Human Consciousness. It's Joe Gentry, filmmaker and College of Complexes regular, will discuss how human perception has a binary character to it. It's not Mars or Venus or left brain. It's not Julie and Jane's bicameral mind. It's something altogether different and yet unexplained. This perceptual diversity is best expressed in symbol form and some easily understood symbols. To others, it's a riddle. In this riddle is a key or secret knowledge which explains a major part of otherwise sensible people are manipulated. John Gentry will ask, can you afford not to attend? Anyway, it's on your itinerary there. And March 15th, we have Restoring Civility to Our Communities. That's with Carol Donovan, attorney for over 30 years. He's a mediator with background in probate law and Democratic candidate for House District 107. She's going to be talking about restoring civil liberties. I won't go into that. You've got the itinerary, so look it over. Now, as for our speaker tonight, which speakers, actually, we have two blues brothers from the Windy City, Chicago. Peter Perot, he's sitting, where's Peter? Oh, he's over here. That's Peter Perot. And Tim Bolger, he's sitting right here. The boys from Chicago College of Complexes will visit the Dallas outfit to argue that Chicago is much more than America's second city. Frank Sinatra called it my kind of town. Peter and Tim will contend and outline why Chicago leads the nation in architecture, commercial invention, and intellectual debate as the first college of complexes in America in 1951. So without further ado, here's Tim Bolger for first.
We're on a mission from God to tell you guys how great Chicago is. But the first thing is, I've aged, so I have to get rid of the shades and put on my reading glasses. The first thing I want to tell you about the city of Chicago is that you guys have no drives down here. No really good drives. This video I'm going to show you is a self-shot, taught, and good video. This is what they call Lakeshore Drive from a tune by Eliota Haynes and Jeremiah. It is actually driving down the Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. Here, hit it. As soon as I get it here. As we said, always technical difficulties. Here we go.
Thanks, Tim, for that. Oh, I should call Mr. Jake Blues and Brother Elmwood. Yeah, I'm here to talk about City of the Big Shoulders, as we call it, or as Carl Sandburg called it. Or maybe this year we're shrugging those big shoulders because of the Cubs baseball record and Bears football team. But we can always brag about our hockey team, right? This is the season. We got the weather for it. Yeah. It's a city with regional muscle, or as some of the boys call it, national clout. And I look at Texas here as we flew in last night, and it's a state of big oil and big technology, like your Raytheon and your Texas Instrument. But we're a city of big agriculture, a city of big water, I realized. And I wanted to know something about that from someone, and our mayor says, you know, it's our clean water supply that's going to make us great and bring us more tourists in the end. How many cities can claim that kind of resource? Companies that have banked off our city and our region are big ag producers like ConAgra, Archer Daniel Midland, companies that profit on soy, corn, and other foodstuffs. For our commodity market, that's enormous as far as a kind of Wall Street of the Midwest, the commodities market and grain exchange. I've also realized that we're one of the biggest junctures of interstate highways to Wisconsin, Indiana, to Iowa. And you can barely transport yourself through the Midwest without touching on Chicago as an interchange or as a through point. Route 66 may run through Amarillo here, but it starts at Lakeshore Drive.
Yes.
Yeah, as the tape showed. Second busiest airport in America, and railroads converged. So many railroads converged in our town. So it's a regional hub for Amtrak. You can't travel from, say, St. Louis to Minneapolis or Detroit to Milwaukee without passing through Chicago. Our host tonight, and I'm really happy about staying with them, Tom was talking about Union Pacific and Burlington Northern, Canadian Pacific, the Milwaukee Road, and the famous Rock Island Line is a mighty fine line. All passed through Chicago, and most of them still pass through Chicago as a hub. Wanted to talk about industrial muscle. That's what we're all about. Not so much high tech or oil as in here in Dallas and Houston, but such heavy hitters as McDonald's Corporation, based here in Chicago. Sears, for many, many years. Happened to find a mini version of the catalog, and there it is. The old Sears catalog. This is a mini version of the 1909 Sears catalog. So retail merchandising was a staple for our town. Food producers like Kraft, Sara Lee, Tootsie Roll, all based in Chicago. And some high-tech organizations like Motorola and now Boeing is headquartered in Chicago. So it's that sort of industrial muscle that's put us on the map and made us leaders. Service industries. My friend Jake Blues here knows quite a bit about service industries that grew out of Chicago. I'm going to let him speak more on that. And he works in a service industry, so he knows what he's talking about. Jake.
One of the biggest things that Chicago was known for was the development of the internet. You know, it was in Illinois, just about 175 miles from the city of Chicago, that the first internet browser was invented. It was called Mosaic, and it was done at the University of Illinois, which happens to have a branch in Chicago. The Mosaic browser is now known as the Mozilla Firefox browser in its latest iterations, and it was one of the things that really got the internet growing. You also have Playboy Enterprises, which has its headquarters in Chicago, and many of you may remember the old commercials for the Playboy Key Club. You also have the Leo Burnett advertising, you know, where you have the Borough Man and everything else. But I want to really tell you a little bit more about what it means in Chicago. I started working for one of the pioneers in the internet online auction business called ubid.com, and they're located in Chicago. Like most of Chicago companies, though, they did have a little bit of an element of corruption in them, and so they've been through at least 4 or 5 changes of management and are now back in the city downtown after they were exiled for a little while in a little town called not Detroit, it was Itasca, Illinois. They actually had to move their headquarters out of the city for a while when their management went a little bit out of business. Lots of inventions have come out of Chicago. For example, one of the biggest things that you may not know of is there's this little thing called the University of Illinois Atomic Pile, which was made in 1939 by a gentleman by the name of Enrico Fermi, who actually started the atomic power industry. You have Fermilab there, which is the only running atomic accelerator in the United States. Now, I know you guys in Texas had the the superconducting super collider, and it ran out of money. Fermilab's still there. We also have Argonne National Labs, which is another big part of what I feel might be the next innovative change in the thing. And of course, the Exelon Corporation, where we get 20% of our power through what I consider green, carbon-free nuclear technology. There's more and more and more that I could talk about on the industries, but were just a few of the keys. Peter, take it away.
Thank you, Brother Jake. And a couple of other services, regional advertising. Leo Burnett Incorporated gave us the Marlboro Man, right? Quite a while ago. Not so fashionable now. The Jolly Green Giant came out of Leo Burnett Studios. Tony the Tiger, and on and on and on. This is the service industry that made Chicago great. Leo Burnett.
They're great.
There it is. So it's that industrial muscle, and back when you had Fort Worth in the stockyards, much earlier than that, Chicago before the Civil War had cattle drovers down Archer Avenue bringing cattle from downstate Midwest regions into the city. It got to be a big stink and quite a noise, and so we were able to transfer that sort of thing to railroad cars. Again, we're back to that railroad hub of the nation, supplying a nation and the Civil War with the Union Army with beef, bacon, pork.
It was in boxcars being shipped to Chicago.
And refrigerated boxcars invented by Armour, Swift, Patrick Cudahy, and other big companies here in Chicago. Well, there was a reaction to all that, and I don't want to let all this big industry pass uncriticized. Because in 1886, we had our Haymarket riot downtown, a police riot, they called it. In 1968, almost 100 years later, we talked about a police riot at the Democratic National Convention. We can talk about the Pullman Railroad strike of 1893. Federal troops in our city trying to stop the railroad strike and break the glut at Chicago. More recently, in 2008, sit-down strike at Republic Window Corporation. I don't know if you remember, 3 years ago, Christmas, they sat down at their machines and refused to leave Republic Windows. Susie remembers, probably, and Carolyn was working in Chicago at that time. They won the strike and did get a settlement after all. 2010, we had the G8 NATO summit. Quite a battle in the streets again, and some gas was released and some clubbing, but managed to keep the peace in Grant Park in the end. And more recently, the Chicago teachers strike, and I am a union Chicago teacher, so it was dear to me. That strike set the pace. History, of course, here we are. So I don't want to let the labor side of things go unspoken for, as well as being an industrial powerhouse. I did want to talk about our contribution to the arts, from literature to architecture to even comedy, and here we are. And I had a little clip that I put together, and Tim will bring up, of some architectural giants, I would say, starting with, well, we may. Our videographer advised us not to, but...
Jake's in the way.
Right. But Jake's chapeau is in the way. Just a couple of images, and Jake would, if Jake can double click the blue circle, highlight and double click, this will expand, and here it is. City of the Big Shoulders. As you look at it, it's got shoulders, doesn't it? Oh, Jake, would you go back to slide 1? We'll get to that. Yeah. All right. You may need to freeze that. You may need to freeze that. A Skidmore Owens building, and of course you've got plenty of them downtown. The old Nations Bank and the Ampay building, and some of the towers you have, all started with the big box or the glass box in Chicago at Illinois Institute of Technology. Jake, can we have another slide? Oh, my brother's right on it. Some of the new boxes going up on Michigan Avenue, but we're particularly proud of Millennium Park here. And another.
The Bean. Where's the Bean?
And the Bean. We just sort of rolled past it. But number 3, Jake, you're going back. D. Meister. And D. Meister is Frank Lloyd Wright. How should I say? Son of the Midwest and homeboy. And Frank Lloyd Wright inspired an American architecture that grew out of the prairie. He said, stop aping Europe and classicism of Rome and Greece and create our own, something that grows out of the Midwestern prairie. And so, we get his own home and studio, which he experimented with, took ideas he wanted to give his clients, and tried them at home first. So is what are you working on, Frank? Oh, just another extension to the bedroom. And as these things would work for him, he would pass them on to clients. Here's his house in 1908, the Frank Lloyd Wright home and studio. I was so pleased to be visiting one day when his son Lloyd Wright was still alive. Now this is in 1978, and Lloyd Wright was still around and advising at the rehab of the home and studio we have in suburban Oak Park. Jake, one back. Okay. And there he was. Really drew a lot of attention in his elder golden years, Lloyd Wright. Now, Jake, we go to number 4. And there it is. Talk about organic architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright gets to look at things like this in the southwest of the U.S. and decides the muscle and fabric of these kinds of things are what he wants to show off, and not bric-a-brac from European Baroque architecture. So he designs these sorts of elements into, what do we got? And next. And next. And there we are. Unity Temple, a house of worship. No indication of Christianity on the walls or any cross on the front of the building. And I know your Unitarians are active here in Dallas, that Tom and Susan advises me, and maybe come to some of these meetings. How about another slide on Wright? I call these his steamboat houses. And Wright had an idea that people would say, where's the front door? And Wright would say, well, if you don't know, you probably shouldn't be at my house. So, hidden away at the steamboat wheel here is the entrance to this prairie-style shingle house, 1910. Far ahead of its time with its Victorian neighbors on the street are these prairie homes. And another. And his trademark planters that he often put on many of his homes, and his red tile, signature red tile you'll see in some of these renovations now. remakes of Wright buildings, even commercially now, banks and such. You know, he didn't always hit it right, and many of the buildings did show wear, tear, and leaks, and it's very hard in the Midwest or in the Northeast to live and maintain a Frank Lloyd Wright home. So this Snowflake Motel that he designed was a giant failure, and they tore it down in the 1980s. But he designed about 900 structures in his life. Now, I was happy to find right here in your town, the Kalita Humphrey Theater from 1959. So he did do some work and was contracted here in your town. Thanks, Susan. And again, I was lucky enough to be able to spend a weekend and stay, cook breakfast, and take a shower in a Frank Lloyd Wright home. My wife and I rented for a weekend this for my 50th birthday. It was kind of a surprise. So there we are under his trademark carport in a Frank Lloyd Wright home for the weekend. And in another slide, I get to sit in the office, have breakfast in the dining room. A really fine weekend. There's another house in Wisconsin, a summer home he designed, a cottage that can be rented too for a weekend. But most of his homes were pretty grandiose for some pretty large clients. And this one is more typical than those cottages or Usonian homes that I was happy to spend a weekend in. He believed he was designing for every man, and that even the most humble teachers, civil servants could afford to build from a blueprint of Frank Lloyd Wright Usonian home. Let's take a look at a more modest one right here that you could build yourself for under $3,000 if you had the know-how and a whole lot of wood. That's in just over the border from Lake County in Chicago up into Wisconsin. Well, let's see some more. The poor man's working class bungalow is so typical of Chicago neighborhoods. I think we have the highest concentration of bungalow housing, and I call that a poor man's Frank Lloyd Wright after all. It has elements of art glass in the windows, and the trademark planter I showed you, but it can be a home that a working family could afford and easily get a mortgage for. In towns like Cicero, if you've heard of them, or Berwyn, or in Oak Park, not far from the city line. And look at another. I'll bring you one here, a bungalow, or I call it Texas bungalow. This one I photographed in San Antonio. So the bungalow movement was something that came out of Chicago and spread across America, particularly 1920s, 1930s, up to World War II. What else do we have? Well, this whole prairie style has caught on to such an extreme that now I'm going to drive in banks that are Frank Lloyd Wright prairie imitations, like Chase Bank here. It's got the prairie weeds. It's got a lot of the markings that are so typical of the prairie style born in Chicago.
Check out the arch, particularly.
Right, a Louis Sullivan innovation who said form always follows the function of a building. Some other giants would be Daniel Burnham, saying, "Make no small plans. They have no power to inspire men and women. Make big plans." Daniel Burnham, who planned our city grid and our lakefront. I went to the Federal Post Office a couple years ago, and they had designed the entire new post office in prairie style, American indigenous style that grows from the soil. And finally, what do I do on my weekends in Chicago? Well, I promote something called the Maxwell Street Market. And for 100 years, we just had our birthday in 1911, for 100 years, it was an open-air market in Chicago where you could buy a license for $1 and buy, sell, trade, anything on Maxwell Street. And I mean anything. One cameraman was filming left his camera in the station wagon, and this is 1980s where we called them station wagons. And he walked along Maxwell Street telling people about the problem. They said, "Stay right here, I'll be back in 10 minutes." The fellow went and got the camera, brought it back to him and said, "Here it is for $100. No question, I'll pay $100 to get my stuff back on Maxwell Street." You know, it's Hot Shop Haven. Oh, I can tell you the stories, but go ahead. We still celebrate with these t-shirts on Home of the Blues, the electronic urban blues, Chicago. Not New Orleans style, not Memphis style, but the electronic urban blues that I'll talk about in a couple of moments. Well, these slides, I'll stop with our incarcerated governor, who is still in federal pen. Here's our current governor, and he's a Democrat, Patrick Quinn. And this is at Al's Beef in my neighborhood, Little Italy. And I put some books out on the side about neighborhoods I've written about. But here in Little Italy is a portrait of our current governor and the governor before him. And they put up kind of a grill over his face because it's signed, "When I get out, see me." Signed, Rod Blagojevich. He's still in federal incarceration for, it's a long story, but we've had 3 governors who have been convicted of federal crimes. So I guess I can't boast a completely clean past to Chicago.
But at least Illinois investigates and puts away its corrupt officials.
Yes, we do. We have Governor Kerner and some others. The machine still works well in Chicago. All right, let's stop with that. Let's stop with the downtown and the new Millennium Park and the Bean. And well, we didn't get it all there. We showed you some of the, call it salad bowl or potato chip bowl here. It's a Frank Gehry band shell that we're proud of.
I call Chicago the Bean, the Chicago kidney stone.
All right. I want to talk a little more about literature that shaped America, and I hope Tom calls time if I'm going too deeply with this. But we have created a literature. We've created a oh, it's so glaring. Well, you can see the books better. A literature that swept the nation. We all know about Carl Sandburg and City of the Big Shoulders. But as well, we've got a favorite son, Ray Bradbury, from a little bit north of Chicago, who just passed away after writing many, many novels. In 2013, we lost Ray Bradbury. Studs Terkel, oral chronicler of our times and the Great Depression, right? Division Street America, Hard Times, so many important and vital books come out of Chicago. Saul Bellow, Nobel Prize winner from the University of Chicago. Gwendolyn Brooks, our black poet laureate. Thinking more about newer, more pop authors, Sarah Paretsky and her murder mysteries that have been turned into films. Now We Live on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. So there's a young, new writing generation coming up, black, white, and Latino. Want to talk about our contribution to jazz, going back a long way. Louis Armstrong played at 5 different clubs in Bronzeville.
Why don't you explain a little bit of what Bronzeville is?
Bronzeville is the Savoy or the Harlem Avenue of Chicago. The Apollo Theater of Chicago is the old Regal, where we had people like Armstrong. Cab Calloway played at 3 different clubs. And he'd play one gig for straight pay, and then he'd play after at the Palm Tavern for cash, that sort of thing. Benny Goodman was born in Douglas Park, not far from the downtown on the Loop train. Played at 3 different venues. Not to ignore so many important vocalists like Nat King Cole, who went to high school in Chicago and learned through band class to be a great singer through chorus. Bessie Smith, powerful vocalist. More importantly today, heroes to me like Herbie Hancock, who won a couple of Grammys now. He seems to take them every year in some category. And our blues favorites, the home of the electronic urban blues that was born on Maxwell Street for just a couple dollars and a hat. We spawned such artists as Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Coco Taylor. So that's a little bit about our music contribution to America. My God, it's a cornucopia in Chicago. Tim managed to pull, I should say Jake Blues, my brother Jake Blues managed to pull together a list of films, movies, going back to as far as the 1920s when Charlie Chaplin had the old S&A studios all to himself in Chicago, but had to leave for warmer weather in California. Jake, some of those movies, those golden hits from our city.
We start off with a good old... How many of you guys have ever seen the movie Risky Business?
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks.
Tom Cruise.
It was a teen comedy filmed on the North Shore in the Loop, and you can see if you watch that many of the classic scenes of Chicago, including the Wrigley Field. North Side 777 with Jimmy Stewart. Any of you ever see that one? That is a classic prison drama, mystery, made back in the 40s, I believe. And of course, who can forget Ferris Bueller's Day Off? That's another one. And of course, we have Cooley High School.
Top school.
Yes. And then of course, in the more recent innovations, you have all those Transformers movies that were filmed in the city of Chicago, where they had all the demolition and everything else. The Loop was quite used as a set along that stuff. Yes. You had the Sting with the elevated trains around the Loop. The Untouchables. Yes, but it was used, the Sting had a lot of the Loop and the elevated trains and drama, and it starred Newman and Redford. Okay.
But it took place 100 years ago, so how would they have the L for the train?
Oh, it was about the 1930s.
Yes.
And Redford were grifters.
Grifters.
So they did have,
Right, they had the L.
Did they have the L back then?
The L was actually created by a gentleman by the name of...
Samuel Ince?
No, Samuel Insull did the... no, he was another clown who was a politician. The Chicago Railroad and the L basic... We'll get into that in the question and answer period, okay? But the L's been around since the turn of the century. And the gentleman who created the L also went on to design the London Underground. And he was quite a comedic clown too. He wound up privatizing the L system, combining all the railroads together, and then left Chicago under a cloud of controversy. We'll just say it that way. He then went on to design the London Tube system. But when we go back to movies, we have The Negotiator, Uncle Buck with Wrigley Field and John Candy, While You Were Sleeping with Sandra Bullock, Batman, and of course one of my favorites, the movie Chain Reaction, which was a movie that was filmed all over the city and has these incredible chase scenes where they go out to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and to Williams Bay. And of course, they go to the Yerkes Observatory. Oh, by the way, that man who started the L, his name was George Yerkes. Now, TV, we have a lot coming from there too. For example, many of you guys remember Good Times of Cabrini Green. Bob Newhart's show where they did his apartment in Marina Towers. Even the Hill Street Blues theme song was filmed in the old Maxwell Street station. And of course now the new infamous series, The Chicago Fire. Peter?
Thanks, Brother Jake.
What's that?
Well, of course.
Oprah Winfrey.
Oh yes, Oprah Winfrey.
And she lives in Bill Bender, that architectural tour.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Groundhog
It
Day.
was filmed in Woodstock, Illinois.
No, that's close.
And as a matter of fact, my cousin happened to be an extra in Groundhog Day. And as a matter of fact, if you go into Woodstock, Illinois now, you'll find that that whole square has been landmarked, and it'll be much the same as you would see in that movie of Groundhog Day. So Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania is actually good old Woodstock, Illinois. The county seat of McHenry County, where I happen to be from. Strong, Republican, clean government. Peter.
Thank you, Brother Jake. Yeah, let us not forget the Blues Brothers. Very important film, and we'll be playing a clip of that in a moment next. But all of you, I'm sure, have heard about Second City Comedy Hour. Second City was stand-up comedy before the Comedy Shop in L.A. That's a young pup compared to Second City in Chicago in the 1960s. People who came up through Second City comedy were John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. Bill Murray, we've already talked about. John Candy, already mentioned by my brother Jake. And movie stars like today, Tina Fey. And the Canadian branch, Steve Carell and Mike Myers. All coming out of this stand-up impromptu tradition of Second City comedy. I'm going to play a little bit of that. Soul Man, Belushi Aykroyd teaming up at their finest.
Is it Sweet Home Chicago, actually?
We can do a little of that. We can do a little. Let's see some of that. The film that made the brothers famous.
brothers from Chicago. Thank you. Peter.
See, that's a film biography, isn't it? Wonderful, wonderful. Let me come to a conclusion.
You got 15 minutes.
Oh, well, I just noticed two artifacts on the table, and going back to Chicago cinema, Hoop Dreams, an amazing film, true film about ghetto kids rising to college scholarships through basketball as the vehicle. And it was produced by a little-known group of guys in Chicago called Cartemquin Films. They also worked on the Cooley High School project. So they're really indigenous filmmakers. It's really important if you can get your hands on this at Netflix. And talking about Chicago literature and Nelson Algren, a particular favorite of mine, because he lived in the Wicker Park area, rented most of his life, and was always in need of money. But finally, this poor pauper hit it big with Man with a Golden Arm, Otto Preminger director, and Sinatra as Frankie Machine, is it? Yeah. Kim Novak, if you remember this one, from 1956. The author was always in need of money, and when he got the Writers Award, the Book Award, National Book Award in New York, the next day he went out in New York and pawned the medal to get more cash just for a living and for life. He was a quintessential beatnik writer who didn't want to work for anyone but wanted to keep writing. So he was quite a character. Nelson Algren, Man with the Golden Arm, and so many more. Brings me, though, in closing, to, I think, one of the most important contributions to national history, the College of Complexes. And you are part of the great fraternity. It grew out of soapboxing, Hyde Park style, as they say in London, in a place called Bughouse Square, a small park in Chicago, where people got the idea on Saturday night to soapbox on any political notion or abstract idea they had in mind. Later it morphed indoors, since our weather is so awful. We're so glad to escape, my brother and I. It morphed into the Dill Pickle Club, where you could say almost anything you liked for a few moments, one fool at a time style. And then later on, a janitor at a small bar decided to start what he called College of Complexes in 1951. His name was Slim Brundage, and he was a maverick. From Bughouse Square to the Beat Generation, the ravings of Slim Brundage. And here are some of the characters who passed through the college. They even have a diploma. At that time, they had a diploma from the college. And I'm going to pass this around, but to whom it may concern, this diploma is awarded too. And you filled in your name after you paid tuition, the $3. Bachelor of Complexes, Maximum, and there's the certificate. So, al maximo, you would graduate from the college soapboxing. Came to be called Hobo College from critics. The idea was a playground for thinkers to disquiet the mind, and that's what we're doing tonight after all. Now, I put some of the neighborhood books I've written on that table. Labor of Love. It took a couple of years to write each book, and I think you've got the series here in Dallas about particular neighborhoods. But the posters are giveaways from the blues greats of Maxwell Street. I'm giving those blue posters away that are on the wall. and talking a little bit about the future of our city. There's no east side like you have to expand to, because in Chicago, if you expand to the east side, you fall in the lake, right? So one way, excuse me, sir, but one way we plan to expand is through landfill here. That we can push more landfill, stone and sand, and create islands of recreation. And one has been done already, this finger that extends, it's called Northerly Island. And Mayor Daley in his clout, about 10 years ago, decided to take Northerly Island from the federal government. And during the night, ran bulldozers across the runway. It was a private airstrip for corporate executives.
Northerly Island at the time happened to be otherwise known as Chicago's Meigs Field. And it was one of the largest general aviation airports in the city of Chicago and Cook County, which basically means it didn't carry much passenger traffic, but if you had general aviation, which meant cargo, which meant flying in of dignitaries, which meant this, Daley in his wisdom had the machines come in. It's now parkland and concert footage. Kind of a shame.
So the machine sometimes does some good for the common folk. The Chicago machine, the Democratic machine, cut big X's across the airport so any pilot could see, can't land there. There's bulldozed X's on the airstrip. So we've now taken it over for wildlife, for fishing, and for beaches. This is the future of what's going to happen more and more in Chicago, all the way to the Indiana steel mills that are being retaken and greened in. So I'm really proud of that development. Well, here we are at the pier. Here we are at the Ferris wheel in the old Navy pier. But this is a new development, no more than 10 years old. And soon in Hyde Park will be more beachfront and wetland. Susan.
Yes.
On the pier,
One of the piers. All right.
Are we getting into the Q&A?
Actually, Peter, I want to talk a little bit about another legacy of the city of Chicago. Many of you guys may not realize that there's a Mr. Stanley, and his cup is now presently with our good old Chicago Blackhawks. We have won the World Championship Series, 2003, the Chicago White Sox, and we have our legacy of the Bulls. As a matter of fact, Chicago is so good and their fans are so dedicated. I want to show you the following clip that was presented from the Chicago Opera House. And I think all of you are going to sit down and you'll enjoy this one.
We got to see your new
For many of you who want to visit the proud city of Chicago, it is strongly recommended that you go to a site called architecture.org, which is the website for the Chicago Architecture Foundation. They will give you a good historic tour of historic and modern skyscrapers and have many tours throughout the village and the municipality of the city of Chicago.
I'll pass around a book on the college, the history of the college.
And now we will take your questions. Okay, do you have a moderator here like we do?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Tom's the moderator. Is Tom the moderator?
All right.
He's busy right now.
Well, let's take your first. Yes, go ahead.
My question
Personally, I think it's the fall, just at the turning of the fall foliage. The smog looks particularly great as you're driving down the Dan Ryan, along with those new city beautification projects where you can see trees and flowers as you're sitting in the Chicago traffic going forward. And oh yes, you can go to the botanical gardens. You can also go to several areas around the city where you can see true flowers. But to really get that essence of the city, you have to drive down the expressway on rush hour and see the fall foliage in its full colors on the embankments of the interstate.
And of course, there's always Groundhog Day, a good time to come, good day to come. Groundhog. Go ahead.
Yes. Would you care to comment on the socio-economic shindigs of Mayor Rahm Emanuel?
Whoa. That's a hot potato. That's a hot potato.
Rahm Emanuel is... Personally, I think Rahm Emanuel is doing exactly what the kingdom of Mayor Dailysville wants. He is continuing the fine tradition of running the democratic political machine in indicting people and in enforcing the thing with corruption. The one thing that you may have with corrupt city officials is the trains run on time, the streets get cleaned, the garbage gets picked up, and you have roads repaired. Now, even if it's corrupt, if we can get that in the city of Chicago, perhaps maybe you guys could learn a few things in Dallas.
It does make me wonder, though, why he'd moved from the Obama administration and from the White House to our town. Us? Moi? What's he doing here? Well, where do you go after that? Governor, I don't think he can be or wants it, so I'm not sure where he goes after being mayor, but he's home back close to his kids. Anyway, in North Chicago.
I've been to the Windy City twice, and once was about 6 or 7 years ago in family reunion, and I just remember we were mostly at the hotel and not too many sites except for the Bean and all that. But the first time was the ABA convention, American Bar Association convention, about a year after the Democratic convention had been there. So that was interesting. I was married to an attorney, and I enjoyed attending things and seeing things. And I remembered the old Navy Pier compared to 5 years ago or whenever it really has commercialized. But, so about 1978 or 79, we were at a private party at the Playboy Mansion. Yeah, the original Playboy Mansion. And at that time, Hugh Hefner had just moved out. But he left artwork behind, nude statues and stuff. And they had a live band for us, and we could dance and eat and all that. About, 100 of us with young lawyers. And then this is interesting, because if you've ever been to a Club Med, they do this there too. The question is, do they still have it there? Is it open to the public? Do they still have parties, or did they demolish it, or whatever?
All the fun has gone to L.A. as far as Hugh and the girls, but he left Christy, his only daughter, in charge, and she's quite a powerful executive and a charitable one. So she resides in the offices of Playboy in Chicago. Just offices.
Do they have an office at the mansion? Is that?
No more mansion.
No more mansion.
If you still want to see the Playboy action, all you got to do is go to a club called Heavenly Bodies, located in Rosemont, Illinois.
Oh, okay.
Head boy.
Remember there was a swimming pool downstairs.
Elwood, you're a history teacher. We have some documentaries kind of romanticizing the earlier 20th century up there in Chicago, and for us, what we see in our little pinhole view of the world outside of Texas, which is very small. We were talking about how we're kind of isolationist, is the gangster era, Al Capone, and things like this. Do you have a lot of tourist trade based on that up there with the Valentine's Day Massacre? Is it like us in Bonnie and Clyde? It's just part of the deal?
The one thing that there is up there is They do have several, since the beginning of Millennium Park, there are a lot of tour companies out there. They have something called the Chicago Gangster Tours. Where you can take a bus and you can find out everything from where the St. Valentine's Day massacre happened to where they shot what's that guy they shot at the theater?
The Dillinger.
The Dillinger thing.
Dillinger.
Lady in
was good.
Black fingered Dillinger.
He was fun.
When the Lady in Red. They also have another tour company called Chicago Move Film Tours, where they'll actually take you around to where a lot of these places where they film these movies. Where, as a matter of fact, I got a lot of this list from the tour director of that film thing. And of course, you know, we all know with the Chicago Architecture Foundation, with architects. And of course, you know, too, you can even, they've even got restaurant tours where you go in and you sample food and cuisine over time in like such things as Greek Town and Little Italy and Chinatown. And there's a ton of things to do. As a matter of fact, if you even really want to get into it, they have tours of the nuclear facilities that you can go on. Tours of Argonne Labs. Tours of Fermi Lab, as a matter of fact. So there's quite a bit to do, quite a bit of tourism in the city of Chicago.
Hey, I have another question. A big part of our arts on a local level that draw people from overseas are the blues musicians and the Texas blues genre here. And we don't realistically see how things are up there, but when they tour up north to Chicago, the place to play is at Buddy Guy's. And when we think of Chicago musicians, we think of people like Pine Box Perkins and Buddy Guy, because Buddy Guy is really awesome. Is that really prevalent in your mainstream up there? Things like Buddy Guy, or is that just something we're seeing?
Yeah.
Buddy Guy's awesome,
About that. Buddy Guy's in his 60s. He is a legend, and he's got his own club behind the Conrad Hilton. How convenient for tourists after their conventions to jump over to Buddy Guy's. But there's also a blues museum, Willie Dixon's place, and House of Blues that I guess has become a chain now. House of Blues in the old Marina Towers where Bob Newhart supposedly lived during his show, TV show. So you can visit that. You can go to House of Blues, you can go to the Willie Dixon Museum and look at original guitars, and you can go to Buddy Guy's Legends. Yeah, it's a great place. But quite an underestimated and underdeveloped art form. And so many Asians come here saying, what about the blues? Let's see the blues. I don't think we're building enough off of it, and we worry that Maxwell Street may die. So, yeah, I'd rather be known for the blues than Al Capone. I think that's more important.
We have Michael Jordan, you know, too, from the Bulls. The architecture.
Well, as long as I'm double dipping you guys, I've hit on the arts and some of your history, and we have to hit on the politics. You guys have managed to incarcerate 3 governors, and I am so proud of y'all. What can you recommend for us in our culture to start getting these guys in the Hooskow down here? I am so proud of y'all.
Vote in some Democratic prosecutors.
Thank you.
Right, the federal prosecutor that put Blagojevich away had no political ambitions. In fact, he decided to retire after the last governor was put away and spend more time with his family. And he put away the governor before him. So we've got 2 governors on ice. Fitzgerald.
Peter Fitzgerald.
Clean as a whistle. Clean as a whistle. So, yeah. He's sort of the Elliot Ness of our time. So, other?
Wait, I have 2. Where is the best place to get deep dish Chicago-style pizza?
A great debate. A great debate. brother.
I knew it would be a debate.
My brother can inform you on that. Who knows in 2 ways.
The best place where it originated was a place called Pizzeria Uno. But there's another one. It's called Pizzeria Due. Go ahead.
Use the mic, we can't hear.
She said a good old boy from Texas started it. Personally, I like the Maxwell Street Polish sausage. One of the best places to eat in the city. You go down the expressway, Independence Avenue, you exit, there's a nice big sign out there. You got the local culture of the blacks saying, I want some money for the eating. And you have all the elements of the seedier side of town. You can walk in for $4 and get a hot dog and fries. You also have another famous institution. It's a drive-in. It's located at Grand Avenue and River Road in Franklin Park called, it's another
Johnny O's?
Gene and Jude's. Yeah, 2 years ago they were underwater because of the flooding of the Des Plaines River. And now you walk in there, don't ask for ketchup or you'll be crucified. But Gene and Jude's has been around for 50 years. They've also had a couple of other drive-ins. There's another one called Super Dog up in Niles. And it's all there. I mean, I love, well, as you can see, I kind of know my fast food. Peter, any comments?
See, and talk about the arts. Your Fair Park is marvelous. And Caroline took us to Fair Park and pointed out some pavilions today. And Tom Barry and Suzanne showed us the importance of Fair Park. I wish we had that much Art Deco preserved. We don't. Individual cases like the Wrigley Building and so on, but not much in one grouping like that. It's fabulous for you. Kudos to you.
I think we ended up going to a place called East Side. There was places where you could mark chalkboard.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember the name of the restaurant. Okay, well, it was recommended to us by a local, but... and then the second question is, I've been trying to figure out, I ate the best popcorn of my entire life there, and is there any history behind that?
Not sure how Garrett got started, but I dare you to walk by it and not buy the corn.
I
That
know.
caramel corn
Awesome.
sucks them in, lines and lines of people over popcorn. Well, we grow the corn in Illinois. What can I say?
Well, and also the line is like out the door and around the block. I mean, it's that crazy. And you have to get the combined cheddar and caramel. You don't think it tastes good, but it's awesome. I promise.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. Like the hats, man. That's a good touch. Yeah, my dad. I was a Teamsters up in Chicago, and I worked steel mills up in Chicago. I was raised originally in L.A., but I went up there in Windy City and everything. The Loop. What's going on with the Loop?
Well, as I talked about the landfill development, we're going to create an east side by plowing more landfill out there and creating separate islands for wildlife development.
Okay, that's
You might all remember Paul Simon, Senator Paul Simon, created a national lake shore where Bethlehem Steel was, and he was able to green that up and create a national lake shore off Michigan, Lake Michigan. So we are retaining and recovering the land for greenery and for posterity.
For those of you guys who really want to learn about the history of Chicago and its neighborhoods, we happen to have one of the best public broadcasting stations called WTTW. Stands for Window to the World. And there's a gentleman there. His name was Jeffrey Bear. And the story behind him was he was also a docent for the Chicago Architecture Foundation. The very day before he was going to start a job at Channel 11, he had the president of Channel 11 on one of his tours for architecture, and he didn't know it at the time. So as soon as Jeffrey Bear walked in his first day in the studio, the president said, "You're going to do a series of architecture tours for broadcast." Now what he did was Jeffrey Bear then has gone on to produce series after series of Chicago by boat, Chicago by L, lots of series on the outlying neighborhoods in the suburbs of Chicago, and it's gotten to be over the last 20 years quite a portfolio. You'll notice in his first video he has hair and in later videos, he's without hair. But it is a really neat thing to watch if you can look at it. You can get it to it at WTTW.com or just Google Jeffrey Bear. They're now all available for free. And it's a really quite thing. You really should get somebody like that in Dallas.
Yeah, my stepdad, he saw Dillinger when he was a little boy on the running board in one of the cars in Chicago, and so he's filling me in. He was raised there and moved to Green Bay back in Lombardi days. But anyway, I appreciate you guys, Chicago. It has quite a flavor. It really does. Appreciate you bringing a little bit of that to Dallas.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, I've never heard all these years what was done with the cow that burned the city down.
I do not know what happened to the cow that turned the city down, but that has been proven to be a misnomer. The true cause of the Chicago fire was done by a gentleman by the name of, I think it was Peg Leg Pete O'Halloran. He was a little drunk that night and he knocked over the lantern. It wasn't the cow. Mrs. O'Leary was not the one who started the fire. It was a gentleman who was a drunken Irish that kind of got the whole thing started, and because of the weather and how dry it was, and it was all made of wood, it just started a powder keg. So, in the true traditions of the Irish of Chicago, they had a drunken man kind of knock over a lantern like they normally do, and it just kind of fireballed. And they blamed it on a cow and a woman just so that he could go away scot-free. A proud tradition of Chicago with the Irish.
Jake, what happened to Sven Gulli?
Sven Gulli.
His son is actually now on WCIU TV, continuing the same proud tradition. And as a matter of fact, I like Sven Gulli. One of the biggest travesties, though, is when I was a kid, they used to have something called the BJ and Dirty Dragon show. And who could forget the classic TV show of Ray Rayner and Friends? It was good old Chicago television where this guy would wear a bib overall and he'd have his notes pinned to his thing. And it was a children's show, but they also mixed in the news and the events of the day and would show cartoons too for the kids and the grown-ups. I will never forget when I was in 3rd grade watching Ray Rayner and says, how do these guys know where all this traffic is at? How do these guys know the maps? And me and my brother would study the maps, and we finally, by the time we were in 5th grade, knew all the Chicago expressway system. And it was started from the Ray Rayner show and the traffic report right before the Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Billy Sunday and the Pacific Garden Mission. Is the Pacific Garden Mission still there?
Yes,
Billy Sunday was a professional.
Better than ever.
Okay.
Green roofs, greenhouses for growing salad foods now, and Moody Bible College is still
Yeah,
broadcasting.
Moody, I was going to ask you about
the old D.L. Moody Bible chapter, Bible hour, Bible chapel.
Okay.
Early Chicago television was landmark before L.A. and Hollywood. You had, remember Garraway at Large? Dave Garraway, long before Jay Leno, we had Dave Garraway on the airwaves. We had Studs' Place, which I don't think broadcast beyond Indiana, but Studs Terkel had his own TV hour. And never forget, kids, the Kukla, Fran, and Ollie show. All generated out of Chicago studios. Kuklapolitan Players. Whoa.
Elwood.
And of course, who could never forget the Clear Channel broadcast, which means that no other radio station in a 750-mile radius could broadcast on that same frequency of WGN, and perhaps maybe one of the best morning DJs, Wally Phillips. And of course, a lot of the other radio personalities of WLS and WCFL. Yes.
Paul Harvey, good day. Paul Harvey. May have been born in the neighborhood,
No,
but
but
Paul
he lived
Harvey
there.
was an associate of Richard Nixon, and Paul Harvey stayed on the radio for years, decades. Paul Harvey. Good day. Yeah.
Okay, here's the question.
Others?
What happened
Susan?
to the program Wild Chicago, which featured Susan and Tom Berry dancing. The Wild Chicago, which featured Tom and Susan at Don's prom dancing.
Was
Wild
that?
Chicago.
I know.
Weren't those midnight video clips put together? Image Union, it was called. They put on 10-minute clips.
Chet,
Every Sunday
Hey,
evening, Channel 11.
canceled by lack of ratings is what I was told when I toured the Channel 11 studios and did some pledge drives there a while back.
well, if there are no other,
Well, how progressive is Chicago, really?
all those political questions.
Yeah.
I knew.
And,
They haunt us.
and on the current issues and on, going towards marijuana or women's issues.
I like
what's
the
it
way
up there?
Tim put it. Tim, Jake Blues, my brother, said, the city that works, it was a motto. The city at work, and the city that works was put on buses and trains, because we do get huge projects done as far as moving the snow and getting you to work and regulating traffic and tremendous WPA type of projects. David Axelrod is home now, and he's back in town from the White House. It's a team that's going to be formidable, and they're still getting big projects done. Make no small plans, Daniel Burnham
They
said.
just redid Lower Wacker Drive.
Underground.
Underground, the Lower Wacker Drive. That scene you saw in the Blues Brothers where they're driving underneath on Lower Wacker Drive has all been modernized. And there's a lot of other projects coming underway. As a matter of fact, the Illinois Toll Road Authority did the one thing that you guys copied from us. iPass and no-stop toll and electronic tolling. One of the
Another-
greatest inventions to move traffic
Right.
fast.
You might say it's almost a Soviet state, because we are a one-party system, at least in Chicago, and there's nothing like the Soviets to get massive public works done, employing lots of people. But it is rather efficient in that regard, I'll say that.
As
Yeah.
long as the wheels of corruption are greased and certain palms are taken
Well,
care
now
of,
don't tell them.
everything works just fine.
Question in the back.
Yeah. First one might be easier.
Okay, hang on. This
oh.
guy's got the mic. We'll continue tonight.
Our videographer,
What happened to Two-Ton Baker? And since you were under the first, you don't remember Two-Ton Baker?
WWF Wrestling, or what?
No, Two-Ton Baker used to be WGN children's program.
Oh.
You mentioned one of them. The Pirate, that's right. Two-Ton Baker. And the other one, since we were Chicago was the first to build an atomic pile, where's it buried? Mm-hmm. That's a hint.
The atomic pile that Enrico Fermi buried was they actually built it brick by brick, and the atomic reaction was no more than probably about 22 seconds long. They took all the bricks, they tested them for radiation, and the ones were buried in a cemetery a while back and were proven before they buried them. They actually kind of tested them out for radiation, and some of them were reduced to no, remember, it was just a small atomic pile. But I believe the bricks were buried. If you really want to know more about this and other topics, the Chicago Public Radio station, WBEZ, has a series out called Curious City. And they answer all kinds of tough questions about Chicago. One of the most interesting ones they do is something called, what's the best donut shops in Chicago? And sure enough, they found that there's not too many donut shops in Chicago, except for Dunkin' Donuts. But they sell coffee. You go to LA, there's a ton of donut shops. But in Chicago, they're called bakeries, panaderias.
there is a new book out called Beat Cop's Guide to Donuts. Yeah, there is one. And I think they spoke at the College of Complex, the author on Beat Cop's Guide to Donuts.
But what about Rahm Emanuel? How is he being rated as
It's a huge question. Someone asked about Rahm, and it's a tough question. He's only been at it for 3 years now, and in spring he'll be up for election. On the school strike, we clearly trounced him. He had no defense. He didn't come to the bargaining table. He sent representatives, and he caved in on most of the teacher demands, which then opened the field for the suburban school districts that also went on strike, seeing that Chicago could win against a major player like Rahm Emanuel. He's trying to bring in major corporations like Boeing that he did, and Motorola he brought downtown. So that's a loss of the suburbs and a gain to the city. But where's the net gain really to the region if he brought Motorola downtown? So he needs to reach to other states and bring in major jobs. That's the big J word we're waiting for. Jobs, Ram, jobs.
I don't think you can really judge Rahm Emanuel correctly yet, because he's only had a very short time in office. Much like Jane Byrne, who won the campaign because the snow streets weren't getting plowed. Much like Michael Bilandic, who was in a very short time and trounced because he tried to clean up the city. And of course, Mayor Harold Washington, who died in office. Not a too good track record for the short-term mayors. You literally have to go to the dailies to make sure how a city can run. His father, the Kingdom of Mayor Daleysville, and his son, Richard J. Daley, who was even in longer than his father. Fortunately, we did not get the Olympics, and that's another story in itself. By the way, you can see that if you go to the College of Complex's website, and it was one of the first ones that I had videotaped. Why did Chicago did not get the Olympics? The story is an extremely good one from a gentleman who actually led the campaign against the Chicago Olympics. And it's all there available online for viewing. I forget his name, but I'll be more than happy to send Tom a link. Any other?
I guess we're out of questions.
We may want to close with a song if...
No, we got
another?
We got rebuttals next.
We got rebuttals, then we'll close.
Oh, rebut.
We'll save that for the speaker's last word.
Best for last.
Hope you guys enjoyed yourselves tonight.
Yeah. Now you get to eat. Get your food. Okay, now it's your turn. Who wants to be first? Okay, come on up here. You get to respond to what the speaker said for or against. You get 5 minutes.
Well, Chicago is undoubtedly a great town. You'll get no argument from me about that. And you talked about many of the great things about it. The architecture, the history, the music, but that's where I'm going. You failed to mention the best thing about Chicago, that being the Chicago Symphony. I mean, that brass section is amazing if you've ever heard it. You have Bud Herseth, the principal trumpet player who was there in 1944, just died last year. But there's no trumpet player ever that sounds like that. And Arnold Jacobs, who was a tuba player, same story with him. I mean, it's rare that you have someone that's that good. And those two together anchored that section forever, for 50 years. And if you could check out recordings of them, it'll blow your mind. You'll get goosebumps. Honorable mention is from WBEZ is This American Life. Also a great thing. It airs here in Dallas on NPR 90.1 at noon on Saturdays. So check that out too. Great job.
Okay, who's Al? Come on up here. Al Holman.
I've got to have over 5 minutes for Chicago. Chicago left very deep memories for me because we lived up there in Evanston and Wilmette and so forth for about 7 years. And this was starting in 1955, right after my older brother had been killed, and our whole family were just in a state of trauma. We moved from the beauty of living in the country in Florida, where I had nature all around me and hence close to God, and the way that I look at it, to a great big city. And so we had that during the vacations, and my sister and I were in a boarding school in St. Louis during the school year. But Chicago, what all does Chicago have? I went back there to the, what is that? What is the big zoo there?
Brookfield.
No.
Lincoln Park.
Lincoln Park Zoo. So there's this huge gorilla cage. And you go down underground, and it's built down somewhat like that. And there are these huge 4-foot wide glass windows that go up about 20 feet. And big I-beams like this to support them. So here I am like this, just looking at these enormous gorillas out there. And they have a beautiful habitat in there. And this one gorilla, there are trees up here, he has a rope, and he's up on a cliff over to my right, and I'm not seeing this gorilla at all. The next thing I know, shoulders about this wide, his face right here in front of mine, he comes swinging by like this with a rope in one foot and one hand. And when we're eye to eye, he goes bam on the window like that. Everybody jumped back. The gorilla had a lot of fun with that. At the Museum of Natural History, you can find the 2 lions that were featured in their stuffed. I think the film was called Ghost in the Darkness with Val Kilmer, and it was a true story of what happened in the 1800s when the British were building this bridge in Africa. And these 2 lions were uncanny. Male lions never lived together. They found that they did live together, and they operated together, and they were outsmarting the humans and eating them, of course. They were capturing them, but one of the lions would distract all of the forces in one direction, and another would capture somebody and take him back to their den, and they found lots of skeletons in there. But that was a very, very interesting film if you haven't seen that. The planetarium along the outer drive is a marvelous experience if you ever go to that. The museums are just unbeatable. They're wonderful museums in Chicago. Chicago also, during the time that we were living there, had its dark side. There was some serial killer that...
John Wayne Gacy.
Did they catch him?
Yeah, they
He was my neighbor. He was down.
Was he the one who was... Was he the one? What we would find out is that we'd wake up in the morning and the news would say another can was found floating in the offshore with a body part, and they were all surgically cut loose, like a leg or a foot or a head and so forth.
Julie Mae Anderson.
They caught that one?
No. That was Julie Mae Anderson
That they
killed.
Oh, wow.
She lived in the same block I did.
Yeah. Wow. Did they ask you about that? Yeah. And then you have the Polar Bear Club up there. Who could be this insane? I mean, but if they have to cut a hole in the ice, they bathe there or swim there every day of the year. Chicago, people would leave a store along the outer drive or along the shore there in the winter, and I'm going to walk 5 blocks up here to another store, and never make it. They froze. When that wind comes off the lake, there's nothing colder than that. It's just amazing. And I had come from Florida, never had experienced much more than a few snowflakes, up into Chicago, and that was a great education about cold weather. It was something entirely different. Chicago has so many different aspects to it. My chemistry professor in college, Ernest Lyons, received a knock on the door one day during World War II, and an FBI agent handed him an airline ticket and a letter from the president saying, "Your services are desperately needed up in Chicago at Soldier Field." He was up there to separate U-235 from U-238 in the atomic bomb project. And he said that the work was so intense and so many long hours that some of the scientists couldn't take it, and they fled to Canada. And so the FBI would find them up there, bring them back, they would conscript them into the Army and put them back at their job as an Army private at Army salaries instead of the one they had. I mean, that was quite an intense project. Chicago is an amazing place. The whole area up there, it's got a lot of culture. It's got its beautiful side and its rough side, and that's like most cities. and interesting men to come and tell us all about it. I really enjoyed that.
Okay, who's next? It's got to be a next. Is there a next? Are we out of people? This is it? You guys, are we going to? No? Nothing? Nothing? Oh, well. The only thing I could mention is one thing that wasn't, what? No, I could mention that, yeah. I had a retirement party there at Superdog, the place you mentioned. I worked on the railroad. I used to drive by Superdog every night. So I had to stop and get a hot dog there. They had very good hot dogs. So Susan organized a retirement party for me at Superdog, so that's where they had it.
Why don't some of you guys tell us about Dallas and why it's so good?
Anyway, one thing I wanted to mention about Chicago that wasn't even brought up tonight. On the itinerary here, it mentioned that these fellows are from the Windy City. Do you know why it's called the Windy City? It has nothing to do with the wind. It had to do with the hot air in the city council. That's why it's called the Windy City. I thought you'd like to know that. Anyway, that's my little tidbit for... Well, anybody want to talk about Dallas? That's what they brought here. They brought all this information about Chicago here. It's time that someone counter was enlighten them for Dallas.
Politics, all that stuff. We're here. We're visitors.
Yeah, they're visitors. They need to get a dose of Dallas. You want to tell them about Dallas?
Well, the JFK Museum is really popular with tourists.
You want to come up here? You want to tell them about Dallas? Tell us about Dallas.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, you know, we shot Kennedy here. It's my fault.
And who shot JR, too?
Oh, yeah, who shot JR? Yeah, they're doing it again. Yeah, TV series. Oh, we now have in Dallas the largest arts district in the country. And what's happened is, started with they relocated from that Fair Park area, y'all saw, where are they? There you go. To downtown Dallas Museum of Art 20 years ago, I think. And then we have the Meyerson Symphony Center about 20 years ago. And then since then, well, in the last 5 years, boom, and we have, I think it's been 10 years for the Nasher Sculpture Center, which is an internationally known museum. And our museums, if you have a museum card in Chicago, I know when I travel, I use mine from Dallas and I get into the other museums for free. So take advantage of that. But we have this park that was built for 3 blocks over the freeway, and that just opened last year. Clyde Warren, someone named it after their 10-year-old son. And it's sort of like our Central Park, in a way. And it's surrounded by buildings, kind of like you're in Central Park, and then, you have all that around you. But we have great museum, the Crow, C-R-O-W, the Asian Museum. There's lots going on down there, and there's where you have that new Winspear Opera Center, the one with the red ribbon. You also have a tall square building, that's the Wiley. That's the Dallas Theater Center, actually moved down there, the one that was the Frank Lloyd Wright design from that we had, it's still there on Turtle Creek, but basically that theater group moved down to the Wiley. And there's so much downtown to see, in our city hall, and there's the West End Marketplace area, but yeah, I would definitely, and there's even a bus that's free. It's for tourists, and I think it's a shorter bus thing, and it's free. I think it's pink or something. You can just hop it, and it just takes our tourists up and down in the sites, and you can get on and off whenever you want to. And then they also make a little trip down to the Bishop Arts Center. Not necessary to go there, but it's, funky and small and arts and stuff. But downtown, you could spend hours down there. So, the Calaveras Bridge, which, looks great close up. From a distance, it's like, that's what they're talking about? That's what they've been telling us for 10 years. When I first saw it go up, and I go, that's it. But when you're right there, and when you're under it, or like at night, it's like the bands, those silver bands just kind of like vibrate and move positions. It's really cool.
yeah, so what else? Yeah, we have the Arboretum nearby, the Arboretum around the corner, and I actually was invited to the Bush Library. I went last week. I felt like a traitor or something. I went to hear Karen Hughes speak in the Institute there. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yes, yes. And it's really popular now, and it's been a great success. It's science and technology, and it's very contemporary. And if you like gemology, like the one whole floor is full of a lot of gems, but architecturally and just the exhibits, and it's just really, really incredible. Yeah, that's a good one. Perot, as in Ross Perot. So, did y'all have any other questions? I would say for sure, make sure you see all that for those few blocks downtown. They know, and they live near there. What else is there? Yeah, well, there's an area from that downtown area where the park is, and so going north there, a few blocks of restaurants and shops and House of Blues, and then you have the American Airlines Arena where the Mavericks and concerts happen, and lots of condos. Yeah, trolley on McKinney Avenue with old antique stores and things like that. The what?
Book depository.
Well, yeah, I was talking to the JFK Museum. How long are you going to be here?
I'm leaving tomorrow.
Okay.
So we got one day to get up early.
Get up early and do some things, but make sure that whatever you're going to is open already, because I don't know what time the museum's open. I'm not a morning person. What time they open on Sunday? Does anyone know? So noon. Well, you know, if you can't take it all in, I'd say see some unusual ones, like if you like architecture or okay, there's the Nasher, Raymond Nasher. I'd say do that and drive them up and down downtown and all around, and so that you can also see it. That's what I do with visitors in town. Okay, whatever. Enjoy. Rodeo, yeah, there's the Muskie Rodeo. Well, too late for that. Yeah, I mean, my cousin was here. He's in his early 30s, and it was his first trip to Texas. And so I took him downtown, all that stuff. I said, you know what, we have time. Let's go over to Fort Worth. And he said, I've heard of this Billy Bob's place. What's that? He just loved it. And they weren't crowded at all that night. So he just went all around and the gift shop and everything. Too bad Willie Nelson wasn't there. But, yeah, I mean, you can really get a taste of Fort Worth if you have time, but then that's an hour back and hour 45 minutes each way from downtown. If you have time to take them down. What time's your plane?
6.
6. I don't think I'd have. I don't think I'd do the Fort Worth. I'd concentrate on Dallas. I don't think you have time to do that. I concentrate on that whole downtown. The what else? You want to go to the library? The Bush Library? Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, go. I'm going to go sometime.
There's only 3 pages. Don't take long. Only 3 books.
I've heard it's very revisionist on the, you know. So I think it would make me kind of sick, but it's pretty nice. And if you go, you can park right across the street from it. Okay, don't try to park or go around the corner or those other buildings or whatever. It's just right across the street from the main entrance, and then just, you know, go across and walk in. I was at the building on the side, the Institute. What else? Yeah, if you want to go to the library, go to the library. Yeah, I mean, you know, I like the Clinton Library in Little Rock. So if you like, especially if you like history and politics and stuff, it's a good time. I do want to go to the Bush Library because it'll be a good, you know, way to kind of see it all in perspective at one time in a few hours, as opposed to bits and pieces or what I lived and, you know, want to kind of set it in my mind or go, yeah, no, it wasn't really like that. Whatever. Okay. Never mind.
Okay, who's next? It's got to be a next. Okay, come on up here. Has to be a next. I forgot your name.
Larry.
Larry.
One thing I noticed about Dallas, really strange. When you go to New Orleans, it's Nolans. When you go to Atlantic City, it's Atlantic City. When you go to Vegas, it's Vegas. When you go to Dallas, It's fragmented. You notice that? There's not, Chicago's Chicago, but Dallas has pockets. You have Highland Park, the bubble. It's not like any place else, right? Then there's South Lake, who think they're Highland Park. All right, then you have Keller Springs, and I noticed every little neighborhood. Now in LA, it's LA, now South Central, you know, white boys don't go down there. But I mean, I was raised around Chicanos and all this kind of stuff. I was a resident of Gabacho. And, but that's one thing I noticed about, Dallas. It's rather fragmented. It doesn't have a city atmosphere like Chicago. You know, there's nothing, you know, the Cowboys, it doesn't really define Dallas. You try to, so it's really unusual. And fellas, that's the thing about Dallas. There's cities within cities here, and a lot of times the two don't meet. I'll give you an example. I was at a gas station, and some goths show up, some kids, and there's a lady, she pulls in a Bentley, and she looks at them, she says, "You are not supposed to be here." And they went, like this. And she goes like this, "You leave me alone. You're not supposed to be here." She could not handle, being in Highland Park, could not handle a goth. I mean, it just freaks them out. So I just noticed we had some people from New Zealand. As they moved around, they thought the same thing. How many of you know what I'm talking about? When you go to Chicago, you got the Chicago feel. There's a feeling about Chicago, or the feeling about New Orleans. It's an atmosphere. But it's, I guess the best way is say fragmented. They have the entertainment district, that's all Arlington, the sports places. You know, they bought out some under table deal, put everything over there in Arlington instead of Dallas. Everything moved over there. I was there when they imploded the Cowboy Stadium. 6 in the morning, when they put the explosive charge, you could feel it in your chest, every explosion. The little boy that set it off, he won the deal, and they count down, and we watched the Cowboy Stadium get imploded in that. So that was really interesting. Also, the high five over there. A lot of you don't, they messed up, the engineers, a lot of you don't realize this, the engineers messed up. They missed it by 6 feet when they came together. And so they had to do this corrective measure over there on the high five. And another thing that's really interesting, and I don't get this, why would you hire a company from Spain to build the toll system in Dallas? I don't get it. I mean, there's a lot of people, I mean, we have some brilliant people around here, you know. And then the studios of Las Colinas. Las Colinas is interesting. All the granite curbs over there are from the ranch there in the Las Colinas when the fellow that designed it over there. Las Colinas is really interesting. Have you noticed over there it's kind of like a ghost town though? I mean, I lived over at Las Colinas. It's nice, reminds me of California. It has its own little, it's quiet in the middle of the city. It's got Lake Carolyn over there. They have a monorail that never got finished that was supposed to go out the DFW. It goes in and out of the office buildings. And it's really modern. And they have one of the Chamber of Commerce. Have you ever been over Las Colinas to the Chamber of Commerce? Over there where they have the Mustangs of Las Colinas. That is one of the most modern places you could ever imagine. If you have a chance to go in there and see, if you want to see something modern, a city, that was the only part of Dallas that was really greatly planned, was Las Colinas. And you can see it on the map and that. It's just really unique. But I guess Dallas, you'd say, is it JR? Is it the Cowboys? I mean, it's banking and insurance, we know that. And that, yes. D Magazine, Paper City, yes. Yeah, Texas Monthly, D Magazine, Paper City. If you're really edgy, you can get the Observer. But it's just, how many of you notice that about Dallas? This might help you fellas. That it just doesn't have, you can't just say Dallas. It's, there's the downtown area, and even the downtown area, there's pockets. There's Irving Boulevard that's not a part of, when you get over there on Lemon Avenue and Oak Lawn and Oak Cliff. Oak Cliff was the old neighborhood and everything up by the, what is it, the old Methodist Hospital up there? Isn't that beautiful up there on the hill? Isn't that great? I love Oak Cliff. I love Oak Cliff. I do bodyguard work, or I did bodyguard work here, and we take care of Congress people and everything else. So we get around quite a bit. So we see a lot of things, and so we see behind the scenes what's going on and things like that. That was that's the greatest thing I could probably introduce you to, is the fact that just saying Dallas doesn't get it, it's so fragmented, and every area has, and I'm sure you have Little Italy, and you have this and that in Chicago, but when you say Chicago, it's Chicago. Yeah. When you say Dallas, it's not like saying Chicago. It's just fragmented, I guess is the word. It's a great place. It's a great city. It's a great place to be. It's a lot better in Minnesota in the wintertime.
Oh, all right.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
I guess this will be for Peter. But I got this afternoon. Actually, I got a couple of them. So this is an extra one. You can have this. And you were just talking about, you went to Fair Park. So they include some nice photos of different landmarks like that you saw at Fair Park. And here's another one. What was that? That's the Hall of State. Here we have Old Red County Courthouse. The IMP designed. This is downtown. That's our city hall. I can't recognize that. That might be that building with something cut out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's at Red County. If you go like to the JFK Museum, this is Red County Corner because it's that Dealey Plaza, the JFK.
Who did your Peace Pyramid downtown? That ziggurat or that?
Where it shows through?
It's a white walk-up pyramid.
That's Thanksgiving Square. That's what that is. Thanksgiving Square. It's called Thanksgiving
Johnson,
Square.
IMP? Who did that?
I don't know who did that. I don't think it's mine.
I tried finding it on Google.
It looks like a cake.
Yeah, like
and
a
inside
wedding
you
cake.
can see out stained glass or
It's supposed to be a place to meditate. I want to find that.
And a lot of things are really close. And then on this side you have, our famous, the Hyatt Regency Ball, and that's the Hyatt Regency. This is just kind of a view looking to downtown. This is a John F. Kennedy Memorial. It's right next to that Old Red County Courthouse. So if you were to do that couple of blocks right there where the JFK Museum is, facing the what do we call it? The something where Kennedy was, Dealey Plaza.
Dealey Plaza.
You're going to see the Old Red County Courthouse, and then a block away behind it is this. So here you go. And then I don't know what this is.
Well, that's fabulous.
Anyway, so enjoy it. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
Take our loop
yeah, you can put your notes
catalog
and your brochures, whatever you need.
Our Herbie Hancock CD. We'll take our loop.
Come on up here.
Yeah.
This is our speaker next week, just so you know.
Well, if the subject is Chicago, I only have a very few Chicago stories. I made the mistake of trying to ride motorcycle in Chicago back in the mid-'80s, and I guess the traffic, they're used to the motorcyclists driving between the lanes. I had never really done that. When you didn't drive between the lanes, people tailgated you. And it was really terrible because you're going 60 miles an hour and you've got someone on your bumper and you're right up against someone else's bumper. Then there's a wreck here and there's like holes in the windshield, and then all of a sudden, kapump, I ran over Fifi, I think. I don't know. I really don't know what I ran over, but I mean, I couldn't hit the brakes. That was one of those moments, you know, it's like wondering if I was going to end things there in Chicago. Really strange Illinois, kind of a strange place. I was riding motorcycle going in on one of the highways going up into Chicago. And I guess what the cop was doing, he really wasn't paying attention. I was in the left lane and I was honking along probably at least about 70, which that was above the speed limit there, but I didn't notice he was a cop. I didn't see all the insignia and all that. I think it was early morning, and anyway, he started to slow down to make a U-turn right into me. I hit the brakes, he hit the brakes, we both kind of skidded a little bit, and then I ended up moving on past him, and I pulled over, he pulled over. He ended up just giving me a warning ticket for his mistake. So I don't know, it was really kind of weird. But strangest thing going into Chicago is I don't know what highway I was on. I don't think I was in sight of the loop. That's kind of my reference point in Chicago is, you know, seeing the loop, but as far as orientation. But I watched this young gal in jeans, blouse. She's walking down an off-ramp into traffic, and I'm coming up on that, and I pull over and park my motorcycle right on the triangle area there, and I start approaching her to see what's going on. I mean, you know, is she trying to commit suicide or something? I mean, she seems like she's kind of out of it. And as I look up the off-ramp, there is this minister. It kind of reminded me of your stereotypical Lutheran minister in this overcoat. It's just slightly overcast day, and behind him is his wife, and they're just standing up there at the top of the off-ramp watching this gal walk right down into traffic. So I approached her. I think I might have said something. Anyway, she kind of popped out of whatever trance she was in, and she started running off. I chased her a little bit, but then she picked up speed. I didn't want to tackle her or anything. I mean, my gosh, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. And she goes and she barrels through a barbed wire fence and off the other side, and I was really puzzled by it. And I went up and I talked to the minister dude. Sure enough, he said he was a man of the cloth or something like that. The whole thing was just kind of strange. And then the next opportunity I had, there was a cop who pulled over. I went up to the cop. I said, you know what just happened back at exit so-and-so, and I reported the entire incident to him, and he said, well, oh, that's Chinatown over there. She'll be okay. Those are good people over there. I'm like, oh, great. You know, what just happened? And you know, it's like, what are the odds of just going into a city and running into this kind of activity, just bam, right off the bat? It's just, anyway, that was my Chicago experience. So.
Okay, come on up here.
It won't be that long. I'm Julie. I have two funny stories about Chicago. I went there, I was sort of in a classical music period, and I had gone there to see Joshua Bell with the Chicago Symphony, and it was wonderful. But when I left, I walked around, got around to the train, and I was going to catch the train to go to the suburb where I had a room booked for the night. And it was real late at night, and I was kind of scared, you know, I was the only person there for a while. And then this huge crowd comes in, and there's a bride and a groom and all of their friends. They had come from a wedding, and they were kind of partying, having a good time. And at one point, the bride just laid down flat of her back on the floor, cocks her leg up in the air, and the groom pulls this garter off her leg, and everybody started cheering. And I thought, I don't think you would see that in Dallas. It was kind of a moxie story. It was funny to me. And then after I got to the place, the town where I was going to stay, I had to call a cab. And the cab driver was an Indian. Crete Indian, and he talked about all the different groups up there, and then he gave me his card so that I could call him the next day to go to the airport. And the card said, "You have just been taken for a ride by so and so." It was a kind of a comic thing. Anyway, the humor of Chicago. On a more serious note, two things that I know of that Dallas and Chicago have in common. One of them being they have a huge, in Chicago you have a huge forested area, inner city forested area, forest preserves in the city, And Dallas now has the Great Trinity Forest, which is the largest urban forest in the United States. So that's one thing you have in common. And another thing that's kind of dear to my heart is that in the 1930s, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Abraham Lowe. He was a psychiatrist, and he practiced in the time when cognitive therapy started being used. And by some, he's considered one of the fathers of cognitive therapy. But he has a huge group in Chicago, a self-help group. It's sort of like AA, only it's for people who have had psychiatric illnesses. And a friend of mine here in Dallas lived in Chicago, and her mother was a leader in one of those groups. And now we have about 5 or 6 of those groups here in Dallas too. So he's been given really huge recognition from the American Psychiatric Association in recent years for the contributions for self-help group. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Have we got a next? All right, come on up here. We're running out of time. We'll see. Okay.
We moved here in 1962 down from the Chicago area, and during that time I was going to college up in Illinois, so coming home it would be this long 700-mile drive, and I'd get in the evening mostly. And the first thing that we would see coming over the last major hill down from Denton would be the mobile flying horse in red neon lights. And it was the highest object in Dallas, and today it is way down in the bottom of the valley of the high-rise buildings in downtown Dallas. Dallas has grown unbelievably. Dallas ended at Northwest Highway. It was country past that during that time. Central Expressway was just a minor little road. Changed a lot. I used to fly radio models out in fields. I'd climb through the barbed wire fence that is now Richardson. And then another aspect of it during that time was that there was the legend of the Lady of the Lake, White Rock Lake. And this seemed to be happening regularly during that time. I remember the most dramatic was that a man was driving along at night, and this young lady came out to the road and waved him down. She wanted a ride. She had on a nightgown. She was sopping wet. She got in the car and she said, well, drive up this way. And she got near this house and gave him the address, I guess. But then she said, no, stop, let me out now. She got out and ran off into the darkness. And he wondered about that during the night. So the next day he went back up to that home and knocked on the door and said, well, did the lady get in last night? And they said, well, you're not the first one who has reported this to us, but that probably was our daughter who drowned in that lake about 10 years ago. And there were a number of reports like that, and his story said that the seat of his car was wet because she was sopping wet when she got in the car. Another thing that I would suggest is this city is very infamous for the Kennedy assassination, is get a copy of Judy Very Baker's book, Me and Lee, and read it. I met her when she was here for this celebration. She's lived most of her life now since then outside of the United States because she's probably a target, but the story hopefully one day will get out and expose the real criminals. But the city of Dallas itself has been involved in the cover-up, and this would take time to go into, and I won't do that. But you need to read that book, and I would read some others. Those authors have vowed never, if they pass it on to their children and grandchildren, they're writing new books all the time, never let it just die away.
Come on up here. Just so you know, we've got to leave some time for these fellows to respond.
I'll be like a minute. I just thought of a show that was set in Chicago that I really, really liked called Early Edition, about getting tomorrow's paper today. That was set in Chicago. It's a very good show. Yes. I like that actor too. So, Dallas is well known for its arts, and I'm a member of a community chorus that's going to be performing next Saturday. If you want some information, let me know.
Where is it? What is it?
I'm a member of the Women's Chorus of Dallas. We'll be performing at the Interfaith Peace Chapel, which is over by Hope, Cathedral of Hope. It's that modern chapel right next to Cathedral of Hope, Cedar Springs and Inwood. It's next Saturday at 7 p.m. If you want some information, go to the Women's Chorus website, twcd.org, the Women's Chorus of Dallas.org. Thanks.
We're running out of time, just so you know. So I think it's time that we let you comment on the comment and close the meeting. Oh, I will when they get through. Yeah. Well, we're going to go to Starbucks first, then the truck yard. All right, here they are.
You know, some of the, as a gentleman said about a city of, what did he say? City of many cities. Dallas has so many pockets, he said, that there's no one central focus. And we're kind of checkerboard. This is the amazing thing. And just sitting there listening to him, I came up with Chinatown, Ukrainian Village, Pole Town in our city, Little Vietnam, Black Bronzeville, Little Korea, and Greek Town. And those are just a few I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, there are probably 15 to 20 more pockets, or Lincoln Square, Germantown, and about 40 languages. We talked about the comedy shop, yeah, that. So that's just an amazing part of it, but somehow it glues all together. Right, and then it just sort of glues itself together in a common sort of marketplace called the Loop. But there's that. Also, I thought about your library, and the Bush Library we ought to take a look at. I guess we owe it to ourselves. But we've got, you've got LBJ and you've got the Bush Library here in Texas, and now in Illinois we've got finally the Lincoln Library, and soon to come the Obama Library. So it's 2 and 2.
We have 2 Bush libraries.
Oh, 2 Bush libraries.
Senior Bush was in Texas A, is in
The Eisenhower Library. Oh, yeah.
Here? Oh, I thought that went to Kansas.
the senior Bush is between Austin and Houston.
You've got Eisenhower's library? Not yet.
No, but he was born in Sherman between about an hour and a half north.
Oh, you are ahead of us after all there.
So we have 3 libraries.
And the Eisenhower, don't forget the Eisenhower Interstate System, 1956.
Yeah, dear to my heart. All right. Started it all.
Yeah.
The asphalt jungle. So, we did a takeoff on that rawhide clip you saw, where those Blues Brothers turned around a drunken crowd and got attention, so we're going to demand some attention here. Without melody, we're going to try these lyrics, and we did a spin on rawhide in your honor. And 1 and 2 and oh, rollin', 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 keep those White Sox rollin', though the field is frozen, rawhide. Oh, wind and rain and weather can't stop those Cubs forever. We're hoping that the Bears aren't far behind. Oh, move 'em and head 'em up. Vote 'em in, vote 'em in, vote 'em out. Raw hockey suits us fine. Yeah! There, we got through it.
Thank you for letting us come tonight and present. We really appreciate all of you coming, and I just want to say it's been a pleasure to come here and meet all of you tonight, and I really wish you well with your college endeavors. Thank you again, Tom, for everything, and
Barry, Susan Barry, and all of you.
Now, just so you know, we're going to retire. They kick us out of here at 9 o'clock, so we have to be out of here by then. And we always go down to Starbucks down at the corner, so if you want to meet with our speakers here, they'll be down there, and you're all welcome, and we'll kibitz some more. It's up to you. Kibitz, 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 kibitz.
The emphasis is on the first word.
All right, kibitz, kibitz. All right. I'm Irish, can't help it, you know. They say you can always tell an Irishman, but you can't tell them much. Remember that. So thank you again. That's it.
This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like us, or follow us, and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call. So when visiting the Barbeck's restaurant, tell them you want your reservation to the next College of Complex class.